Hello.
Hello.
And welcome.
Welcome
to another wonderful episode of
Two Tired Therapists. My name's Kyle. I'm a tired therapist.
And I'm Jackie. I'm also a tired therapist.
And together we make
Two Tired Therapists.
How you doing? What's going on?
I'm alive. That's my new answer. When people are like, "How are you?" I just say, "I'm alive."
Yeah.
I feel like that's barely. I feel like that's encompassing the human experience right now. Maybe. I don't know about you.
Well, I'm definitely not thriving.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I'm surviving either. What's kind of between that? Alive.
Aliving.
Alive. I'm aliving.
Yeah.
I'm breathing.
I'm breathing. Yes.
I'm eating. I'm getting through.
Yes. My boss the other day asked me, he's like, "How are you?" And I said, I'm alive. How are you?
Yeah.
And I don't know that he knew how to take that.
Well, I will say I do look forward to us recording.
Oh,
I have to say.
I feel so loved.
I love that we do this. Can I just be vulnerable?
Sure.
Just for a minute.
Sure.
I love doing this with you.
It's so fun.
I love coming to your home
Yes.
every time because that's where we do this.
Yes, we do.
I love to see you because I feel like, sometimes I think I am rotten and people don't get it. And then I sit with you and we have a conversation. I go, she gets it.
I am a rotted soul.
And then I get to see producer Justin.
Yes.
Who is probably one of my favorite straight men in the world. And then on days like today, he cooks for us.
Yes, he does.
Which is great.
Yes, he does.
But do you know what I really love?
Is it?
When I come here?
Is it the dog?
It's to see my best friend.
I think he thinks that you're his boyfriend.
Well.
I think he thinks you guys are in a relationship.
I think we are.
Oh, you are? But
I think we are.
He definitely, as he's like passed out right now.
I know, we can't say his name because he'll start bothering me again.
We can't do that.
To the real reason we're here.
Yes.
Jackie.
I'm ready.
What's making you tired this week?
I won't lie. I'm very tired that all my student loans were forgiven this past
all
week.
Of them?
I wish they were all.
I'm
tired that all of my loans are not forgiven.
I hear you.
Only just $10,000 of each.
Oh, that's all? You're not on the 20?
No.
Oh no.
No,
wow.
I was
peasant.
Yes. I was I'm very privileged and blessed that my undergraduate was paid for by my dad. So I did not have any undergraduate loans, but I was sharply told if I went to grad school, I would have to pay for myself, which was fine. I had no issue with it. And then, you go to grad school, you don't really think about it. I mean, you sign all the paperwork. You're like, yeah. And I didn't have a lot of expenses in grad school. Should I have taken out less loans? Absolutely. Did I? No, not a little bit. But I was able to pay some stuff off when I was in school. Like I paid off my car at the time. And now I have lots of loans. And the interest on those loans is about the same as the loan amount was. And I have lots of loans. And really, I'm grateful for the $10,000. I'm not mad about it. I will not complain about it. Yeah. It is going to touch almost nothing of my loans.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be $20,000 because I have 2 federal loans, but
gotcha.
It's not going to touch much.
Well, I feel like we've talked about this before. You and I might be in the same boat because I feel the same way. I think I do get the 20 because I had Pell Grants, and I'm grateful, but it's not going to help.
It's not going to do anything.
It's not going to.
And
I went from carrying a boulder to
a smaller boulder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish that they would have made it no interest, because that would be a game changer, I think, with the interest rates stopped.
Well, I think ballooning. They're doing something.
They're and I know they're looking at, if you have undergraduate loans, your payback amount is capped at like 5% of your income. So
which would be nice.
If you're interested in this and you have student loans, I think the government has some sort of website. Just Google student loan forgiveness. Right. Kyle and I are probably not the people you should be taking financial advice from.
We are definitely not the people. No.
Right.
But no, I mean, I have 6 figures of
same,
because I think we probably did the same in grad school, where I was like, I need to focus on my studies and I can't work, and so I took out what I could.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. Once I got to internship, I had to quit. I had 2 jobs. I had 2 part-time jobs when I was in grad school. I quit the one. I used to work at Old Navy. Shout out Old Navy.
Oh.
So I quit the Old Navy job because it was going to interfere with the internship, because you obviously have to get so many hours a week. So, and yeah, I didn't. Wow. I wasn't smart back then.
No.
I would have done it different. I would honestly say I would do it differently if I was the current age I am. No regrets though.
No regrets.
No regrets.
Yeah.
So I'm just tired that all student loans weren't forgiven.
I know. And I know, well, at first I was like, I know that they can't just forgive loans, but I'm like, What about the trillions of dollars to, the big companies that got bailed out a couple years ago?
Right.
What about my big company?
Well, right. And I can honestly say, even if I'd paid mine off, I would still be very much in favor of forgiveness for all.
Absolutely.
So I have no qualms about that.
Absolutely.
And people who have qualms about that, I'm going to say something controversial at Brave. You suck.
Yeah.
Because
did you say controversial?
Yeah, Brave.
Brave. I love that.
I'm going to say something controversial. Yeah, Brave.
Brave.
If you're not for forgiveness for everyone, you suck.
Well, I know we're staying on this topic, but I saw a thing that said, like, don't get bent out of shape if this didn't affect you, because there are other things that people pay for that you benefit from.
Well, and a lot of the comments I'm seeing on the internet, which I'm trying not to read a lot of them because it's like people who took out loans are stupid and they're dumb. And I'm like, oh, that's me. I guess that's me. A lot of people are just like, my taxes. And I'm like, your taxes are not going to get increased because of this whatsoever. This has nothing to do with anything else.
No.
But it's very hard to, logic is not strong these days with some people. So,
well, again, or some of these CEOs who are like, you shouldn't forgive, and their businesses were the ones that got forgiven 10 years ago, however long, like,
we could talk about this forever,
it's
but
tired.
It is very tired. But what are you tired about?
Well, this is a shared tired, between myself and a dear friend and colleague and friend of the pod.
Yes.
Danny. Shout out to Danny. Hi, Danny. Her and I commiserate on this often, and it is dress codes in high school.
Oh, okay.
Specifically for the girls.
Yes.
Because and I have she said I can talk about this. Her kids frequently get sent home
dress
for
coded.
very stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
Very stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we doing? Why are we doing that?
I remember it's been a little bit since I've been in high school, but
like 7 years.
Yeah, just only 7 years. We can wear spaghetti straps, or if we wore skirts, they had to, like, you had to put your arms down, and
you didn't do the dollar trick.
No.
Oh, it had to.
We had it. Well, and I did not wear skirts because it's just not for me.
Mm-hmm.
But my arms are long, and so are my legs. So if I was gonna wear a skirt, it would almost have to be to my knees, and I would have been in compliance with the dress code. But yeah, no spaghetti. I just remember no spaghetti straps, no skirts that were longer than fingertip length, and they did it by your middle finger, obviously. I can't remember anything else.
Well, I just remember the skirts that you had to take $1 from
your kneecap.
It was like the top of your kneecap, and then it couldn't be any higher than that $1. Now, mind you, I came from Podunk, Midwest.
Yes.
Where my high school was literally in the middle of a cornfield. So, yeah, couldn't be longer than $1 for every girl, which I think is unfair because people have different body types.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I have,
that's not fair.
Like, people who have short torsos, like, that's not like, yeah.
Spaghetti straps, no, couldn't do that.
No, my shoulders are a mystical device used to seduce men.
To seduce men. Right. Which, that's the kicker. It's like, that's literally the reason they give is, well, the boys won't be able to control themselves. Well, teach them. Because you sure teach girls to control themselves.
Yeah.
And that's the tea.
I can't shout at people when I feel like it, so.
Right. Right. Meanwhile, teenage boys walk around with literally their dicks hanging out.
Yeah.
Visible
butts
penis
out.
line,
Yeah,
butts out, smelling like shit. And that's okay.
That's so accurate.
And that's okay.
Yes. That's fine.
But a young
spaghetti
woman's
straps.
Shoulders. No.
We're like in a...
We're on one today.
Yeah, we are.
We're on one.
This is good. This
it reminds
should be
me of the beautiful... Have you talked to a beautiful girl lately?
No, I'm so upset. I need to find a beautiful... I mean, this is so arbitrary. I just need to... I want to find one that I don't know and be like, you're a beautiful girl. Let's talk. Because I know a lot of beautiful women, but I want to find one that I don't know and be like, you're a beautiful girl.
And then say, wow, I feel so healthy, because that is just like doing 2 hours of yoga.
That line made me laugh so hard every time I listened to it. Because...
Tired. Anyways, so moral of the story, men are trash.
Yes.
That's usually what it comes back to.
Yes, correct.
Anyways, so the education.
Today is a Kyle episode.
It's another Kyle episode.
Yes, I love it.
So we decided to maybe talk a little bit more about mental health, and each of us are going to talk about something that we, I guess, specialize.
I was gonna say, or maybe our specialties,
or that we enjoy to work with, at least. Because I don't want them coming for me if they're like, well, I really specialize in this, and you said this wrong.
Oh, I'll call mine my specialty, because I'm confident
You know a
that I
thing or
can
two.
say that.
Yeah. Okay.
I have had people try to tell me that I'm not. It's stories for other days, but
That's on your pod.
Yeah,
this is my pod
yes,
today.
This
Thank
is
you.
yours, yes.
Thank you. So what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about grief, which sounds really depressing.
And you're making it sound a little happy when you say that. But
Well, it's weird because I have always, I mean, I find death fascinating. Not that I want to die, but I think it's fascinating. And I think then just we as a species, how we deal with it and how different cultures deal with it. Like it's so different across.
It is very different.
All these different cultures and the continents and all of this. So I find it fascinating. So I really like to work with it. One, because I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable working with it. And I think a lot of people can be uncomfortable when people talk about grief. Oh, you.
I'm pointing to myself. No one, Kyle can see me, but no one else can. It's not. I would not. I was actually talking to producer Justin this morning about it because I knew you were going to pick grief. And I was telling him, I was like, I've worked with people who had a loss while I was working with them, but not like that was not why they were coming in to services.
Right.
And it is very, I don't know what the right word is. It can be really daunting as a therapist, I would say, because you don't always know what to say. You don't know what the right thing to do is, so
we'll get to that.
Yes.
We're going to talk about that today.
Because I would love to get schooled.
I'm going to school you today.
I love it.
Well, so the first thing is just what is grief? And so a lot of people think it has to only do with death. And in actuality, it's not. Grief is our response to change. So this could be, you could grieve the loss of a job.
Okay.
You can grieve the loss of any kind of expectation, right? Like if you were going to, I don't know, travel the world one day and then all of a sudden you have to file for bankruptcy and you can't do that. You'd have to grieve over those dreams.
Right.
The loss of a relationship, not through death, but like breakup or even a friendship where it's like, oh, this person, is no longer a good friend of mine. So in actuality, it's that response to change. So we go through grief a lot when it's not just death. But I think with some of those other things, typically grieving looks, it's not as severe typically. It can be, or it doesn't last as long as like when it's someone who's passed away. But grief is a normal response.
Yes.
It is expected, especially when somebody has passed on. So you don't treat grief. Right. So when people come into, let's say, therapy for grief, we're not treating their grief. We can't get rid of it like depression or anxiety.
Yeah. You can't like medicate it. You can't.
Yes. That was my next thing is you cannot medicate grief.
Yes.
There is no medication for grief. You can take a medication to manage the symptoms of something. It's also not diagnosable. So you cannot get grief. There is a Z code, which is kind of like a supplemental code, but it's not an actual
it's not an actual diagnosis.
Clinical like depression, anxiety.
Yes.
However, unmanaged grief can become depression or can become a diagnosable disorder, specifically when we experience traumatic grief, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And I think the interesting thing about grief and trauma goes in this bucket too, is that it tends to compound on itself. So when you experience grief and trauma in one point of your life, and then you experience it later, those two things smash together and become what I like to call a trauma monster or a grief monster.
Yeah.
Versus like depression where, if you experience depression like, in your 20s and then you get through it and then in your 30s you get depressed again. They might look the same, they might be about the same, but they're episodes.
It can be different,
they're episodes. So it can be really hard with people who experience grief and trauma throughout their life because it'll bring all of that back up. And you find this with grief especially when you have had several people in your life who have passed on and then you have somebody else. You think about all those people, right? It comes back up and you're like, gosh, that makes me think of this person and this person. So grief is very interesting. So Jackie, you've probably heard the stages of grief.
Yes, that is very, very popular.
Do you know what they are?
Oh my
gosh. Can you name them?
I know The acronym I remember is DABDA, so I think it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Yes, good job.
Go me.
Do you know who first put those out?
Yeah, it was oh my gosh, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's very, I mean, that's taught in like Psych 101.
Well, so I mean, she was
she was
the guru.
Yes.
Back in good old 1969.
Yes.
Brought these stages of grief, and it's really come a long way. Like, it really, when it started out, it did kind of start out as like, here's how you go through them, and it was very structured.
Yes.
But as time has gone on, that's not a thing. You can go through several stages at once. You can go through the same one over and over again. You know, you can get to acceptance and then go back to denial. But that's, I think, what a lot of people think. So it's accurate, but there are more stages than that even.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's so many other ways that grief can manifest.
Can't you like go from like let's say if you're following those stages, can't you kind of go like if you got to bargaining but then you kind of went back to like you can kind of slide back and forth versus like originally when it came out it was like no, you have like you have to go in this order.
I mean, you could go, you could experience none of them.
Yeah, that's true.
So grief really depends on the person as far as what it looks like. And so how it manifests, I mean. So some people get really sad and depressed, which is what is expected, and will, cry, but some people get really overwhelmed and get really anxious. Some people, it just varies on how it actually looks. Some people get really angry and get really irritable. But then in how you deal with it too, that looks very different. So I always say we're kind of coming up with a like grief map for you when I'm meeting with somebody. Typically, the first couple of weeks or months after, let's just say like the passing of someone, we'll just go with the typical what people think of with grief, like when someone dies. Those are very like solution focused and problem solving, and it's like okay, I have to like plan the funeral, and I have to find the will, and I have to clean out their closet. And so it's very like task oriented. So people don't feel as bad during that time. It's not until after all that's over that then all the emotion will come out. So then that's where they may be sad. They might feel numb. They might feel angry. So let's talk about then the different types of grief. So we've talked about like what we would just call uncomplicated bereavement. Would be the fancy name for that. But then you have two others, and I'm just gonna talk about these two. I don't know if there's more, but complicated grief and traumatic grief.
Yes.
So complicated grief, I think technically means like when it becomes like depression, or when it becomes
that like period in between, like from uncomplicated, complicated, then now we have like a clinical diagnosis. Okay.
But I also talk about complicated grief typically in like with trauma. So it's like, say you had an abusive parent who dies.
Yeah,
that is what I consider complicated grief, because
I would too.
You are probably sad that you've lost a parent, but you're also probably like happy or relieved,
complicated feelings,
and that's where it comes from. Believe it or not, because you're having complicated feelings of like, wow, I'm relieved this person has died because I don't have to deal with them anymore. They were abusive. Could also be a partner too. But I'm also like sad because that's really weird. So that's definitely one of them, and I'll talk later about like how do you know when you should go to therapy. Like that's one of them that you probably will need to go to therapy to sort out those really,
for sure,
really complicated feelings. And then traumatic grief, this typically you see in people who have had like chronic illness or died from a chronic illness, like cancer. It can be like violent deaths as well, like maybe someone who was like murdered or through gun violence, even if you didn't directly witness it. Because you will think about it. You'll think about like how they were murdered or how they died. If it was like a car accident or something. And so this is another one that definitely you will have to go to therapy for, because what people do is when they start to grieve, the traumatic memories pop in. They're very intrusive. And so then you start thinking about them like like how they were murdered, or like I used to work in oncology, and so people would think like, oh, right at the end they were emaciated and so skinny and they weren't talking, and it's
Yeah.
like that's how I remember them, and that really stunts your grief, and
Yeah.
you can't grieve when like that's your last memory of them.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Questions so far, Jackie?
No,
What are you thinking?
This is fascinating because the complicated grief I've heard of a little bit,
Little
bit, and I know, I knew that one was like if you have complicated feelings about it. Like, I mean, I had a lot of like the most I've done like clinically with like clients was in the prison, so like there was a lot of like. I would say some of them had some grief, like grieving the loss of like freedom and all of that.
Oh, for sure.
And like, and then if somebody in their family like died or something happened while they were in prison, like that, like compounded and made things way more complicated.
Sure.
So, that one, for sure. Traumatic grief, I know, is also something.
That's a good example of like the people you worked with in the prisons of, they have to grieve over the loss of their independence and their freedom.
Oh yes.
And they have to rebuild that, and that's a part of the grief process or the healing from grief of that. Your normal is
now
different.
totally totally
and so
different.
you have to grieve over that, and you have to rebuild it, and like some things may be available to you from this previous life, but some things may not be.
I say most things are not. It's not fun.
Exactly. So we'll talk just briefly about. I worked in oncology, and I still do, and that was the biggest. I mean, we would talk about grief, not just in the sense like people would die. I mean, of course, there was a lot of that, but we would talk about like how cancer, that diagnosis changes your life.
Oh yeah,
and that you have to grieve over that.
Yeah,
because people would lose their mobility, right? Like they couldn't get around, they didn't have as much energy. I mean, maybe they lost parts of themselves, like women with breast cancer having mastectomies. They would have to grieve over that loss.
Yeah.
They have to grieve over the loss of the plans they had in their life, right? Like I said, like maybe they plan to travel the world. Nope, you can't.
Nope,
you
not
can't
anymore.
do that right now. And so a lot of the times you're, working with people on grieving, but it's like no one's necessarily died. So I think that's why I like grief too, is because it's really so prevalent in our experience as humans, but we don't talk about it. Like
no one wants to talk about it.
No, and that's.
I think people get scared.
They do.
Like, what do you say? Because
and
I'm sure you'll talk about this.
I
but
will.
It's like sometimes what do you say? What you don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to say something. And even I know that there's sometimes where even if you think you're saying the right thing, it's doesn't come off that way, and you have to be really careful about like. How you say certain things. I sound like I'm talking very cryptically, but it's very much like, I don't know. But like, when somebody, like when somebody who has somebody die, you're always like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. But I always feel like that's such a I don't want to say empty, but I feel like it's such like a hollow statement because it's like
a social nicety,
right?
Like
versus like
anything.
Like I don't know. There's better things to say, I think, and people don't. But then people don't know what to say,
or people say worse things,
or people say, I'm sure they're in a better place. So what if you don't believe in God? Like, I mean, there's just so many things.
Jackie, we're gonna talk about all that.
I'm so excited.
We're gonna talk about all that. So yeah, I mean, that's another. So just talking about the oncology piece is that's how grief can look. It's like we didn't talk about people that died, but it was like this. Essentially, you did die, right? It was like a part of you died, and now you have to no longer be like. You're not Jimmy. You're Jimmy with cancer now.
Right.
And even afterwards, like even if you get through your treatments and like, you get the good job, all is well, then you go back to your life and you think, oh, it's the same. No, because you're still tired.
Right.
You still have appointments. Like maybe you don't have your job you had before. Maybe, I mean, this happens a lot with cancer too. You find out who like your real friends are, your real family. Like maybe you don't have those people anymore. Like. And you have to grieve over all that. Yeah. And again, just like with when someone dies, in the beginning is very like solution focused and very, this is what I'm doing. It's very, what do I want to say? Very concrete and to the point. It's the same thing with cancer in that you get diagnosed, you're like, whoa, this really sucks. But then they're like, okay, here's your treatment. You're going to come to treatment 3 times a week. And then you're going to do this. And you're going to do that. Like you get this plan that you follow. And then people are like, okay, I have a little idea of what's going to happen. And then when they get to what we call survivorship or post-treatment, then, the doctor's like, great, good job, see you in 6 months. And the person's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I got cancer. They're like, nope, you're good. See ya. So honestly, when
Yeah.
I worked full time in oncology, that's who most of my people were post treatment.
Yeah.
Because it's like all that emotional
Oh,
baggage
yeah.
catches up
Well,
to you.
That and anxiety too. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I had to do all of these things. I had to go through all this
Mhm.
treatment. And now, bye. See you in
Right.
6
I mean,
months.
and that's-
like,
I
I
mean,
would be freaked. I would be like, shouldn't I come back in a month? Shouldn't I?
And that's literally, I mean, not that, I mean, the doctor's usually pretty good. But they're
Yeah.
not callous like that. But it usually is like, good job. Like, we'll see you in 6 months. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
no. I got to see you tomorrow. Because another thing that happens too is like when they go in so much, because most treatments are like, some are every day. And so these people go in and, I mean, they get really close with like the staff and like,
Yeah.
you know, even like the front office people,
Yeah.
like they all know them and the
Yeah.
nurses and all that. And so now you have to leave that and go back to maybe your
Yeah.
boring ass life where you don't have that.
Right.
So like they have to then grieve over that.
Yes.
Of like, now I'm back here. So it's just fascinating. So how do you know then when grief is becoming unhealthy? What do you think? What do you think?
Well,
Give me some ideas.
for me, I mean, I feel like it's with any sort of like mental health kind of issue or, you know, something that's being exacerbated is when it starts affecting, you know, different areas of your life.
Yes.
Like you can't work or you can't, you know, you can't socialize well or, you know, like that's the common sort of marker. Is there more than that?
Yeah, there is. But
Okay.
that's, yeah. So like functioning.
Yes.
Which, I mean, again, grief is a little different in that it's expected that you have some days where you just can't.
Right.
But it should just be a couple of days here and there.
Right.
You know, it shouldn't necessarily be consistent, right? Like that kind of like 2 weeks mark that we are usually looking for, or more often than not, as they say. It should just be a couple days. And not that like one day you're like, oh my gosh, my life is amazing.
Right.
But like there's days you get up and you're like, I'm alive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Amen.
Yes.
But some other things, so substance use.
Oh, okay.
No substance use. If that's something that you're noticing is worsening, that's gonna it's gonna stunt your grief because you're not able to emotionally process what you're going through.
Right.
And even though there's not a time period with grief, like there is no like, okay, you should be at this point in 6 months and this point at 1 month. It should get easier over time.
Right.
Even if it's a
it should
little
feel
bit.
like less of a load or less of a burden.
Right. Or it should at least
Lighter.
change in some capacity. So even there should be some days where it's just a little better.
Yeah.
If it's been like 6 months and it still feels like it's the first time, you know, when that person died, like you still have those deep feelings, that's probably not a good sign. Or if you start to feel stuck in your grief and you feel like you're not grieving, and I realize that's kind of vague, but I think most of us know what that can feel like. That stuck feeling is another indication that it's maybe not moving forward.
Right.
So not to say, you know, in 6 months expect this, but if it's not changed at all or it feels worse,
Right.
then it may be getting into that unhealthy.
Yeah.
I also, now, you know, I don't work with children. Grief does affect kids, believe it or not.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Kids are affected
Right.
by death as well and change. And so what's really difficult is that kids typically like 10 and under, it's a little harder because
you have
their
to be careful.
brains are physically not formed to the point that they can understand the like finality of grief.
Yeah. Don't you have to be really careful about what you say to kids?
You do.
Because, if you say it in a certain way, like, for example, when somebody dies, like you shouldn't, there's like some euphemisms. I can't remember exactly what they are, but if it's like daddy's gone away, like you shouldn't say that.
Right. Grandma's sleeping.
Right.
No. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
No.
Yeah.
But it is hard. You can't just say those things either. Like you can't say like daddy's dead. Like they don't, their brains literally do not get that.
Right.
Like the part of their brain that thinks like future does not exist. It is not formed. Like it's not there.
Yeah.
So you still have to explain it to them to say like, you know, daddy will not be coming back or daddy will, honestly, I don't know how you would phrase it because I don't work with kids. I'm just telling you how to not phrase it and leaving you with that.
Right. That's the best we can do.
That's the best we can provide you. But I mean, it's really just talking to them at their level. Like, depending on their vocabulary. Now as they get older, it's a little easier. Being honest, of course, especially
don't lie about it.
Don't lie about it. Especially, again, back to my oncology days, like telling them, like, you know, okay, mommy has cancer and it means that I'm going to be really sick for a while, but the doctors are really great and, you know, I have to have this done and this done. And then, but again, like I have to take this medicine, right? Don't tell them like I have to have this infusion of.
Right. That doesn't make sense.
They're not
going
to get that. But you said they're going to give me this medicine and I might feel bad sometimes and then I'll get better.
Yeah.
And I'll still be here and I still love you. Like all of those things that maybe you would do to anyone else in your life, just at that level that they're going to understand. Because, spoiler alert, kids are people too.
Yeah.
And again, like, so treat them like a freaking person.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
They have feelings.
Yes.
And what's hard for kids is they have the feelings, but they don't have the like capacity to.
They can't describe.
No, they can't describe. They don't understand them either.
No, they don't.
Right, like we can sit here and say, "Oh, I'm really sad because X, Y, Z." They can't. They can't even say I'm sad half the time. Right, like they don't. They just they don't get that. So yeah, none of this like. Grandma's just sleeping right now because they're gonna think, okay, well, when you sleep, you wake up, so grandma's gonna wake up. Or, oh, grandma's just gone for a while. Oh, okay, so she'll come back.
Well, and I know I've seen some things that say if you say, you know, grandma went to sleep and she didn't wake up, then you're going to scare the kid into like, they don't want to go to sleep anymore because they think they won't wake up. So you have to be really careful. I have nothing to offer about what to say to children at any way, shape, or form.
This is it. I mean, some of this, honestly, I just Googled because I was like, I probably shouldn't talk about the kids. But another thing that you can do is, as like a parent or just an adult in their life, is to model healthy grieving.
Yes.
So like cry when things are sad, or like share your feelings or your fears in an appropriate way. Like don't be like, oh my God, we're all gonna die. Like don't do that.
Right. Don't cause panic. But
but be like, you know, I'm really sad that, you know, grandma's not here anymore. I really like to, you know.
Yeah.
Play the piano with her.
I think that's true of any sort of emotion with kids. Like you shouldn't try to mask what's going on because it is you're going to teach something that you're not trying to teach necessarily. Like you're going to teach them to hide emotions or, you know, that's, I mean.
Let's have that conversation.
We probably have another episode
need to have
about
episode
like
for
things that happened in your childhood that will stunt you later in life.
Absolutely. And then, well, and I should say this too, don't make your kid your therapist though. Yeah. And I feel like I need to say it, which is ridiculous, but I need to say it.
Oh, no. It needs to be said.
Yeah. Like, you can say, like, I'm really sad because grandma's not here, whatever, but don't be like, you know, your grandma was so abusive to me, and now it's like, no.
People don't overshare with your kids.
We're not being funny. People do this.
People do this. People really do this.
And then they bring their kid to therapy, and they're like, I don't know why they're fucked up.
Like, I don't get what's wrong. And you're just like, oh, no.
And that's why I don't work with kids.
Oh, no. Mm-mm. I couldn't do it. I really could not do it. I don't know what to say to kids half the time, but I don't. I'm like, hello, how are you? And they're like, what is wrong with her?
Sidebar, in one of our staff meetings last week, they were trying to say, you would know what to do if you worked with a kid. And I said, y'all don't know me.
You know who used to tell me that is our mutual friend, Claire. She would always be like,
Claire,
you're fine. She would say, you know how to work with kids. I said, I have no idea what to
Claire,
say to
we're
those
disappointed in you.
I don't know what to say to these people. They're little people. Hello. What are the children into? Would you like TikTok?
Right.
What is
Right. Well, and as we know, I know how to use TikTok. So
so I would have no idea what to say.
Anyways. So yeah. So there's some things about the kids. Keep a routine. That's kind of the last thing I was looking at some things. Oh, I mean, kids do great with routines. Humans do great with routines.
Everybody does.
So yeah, let's see. Those are I think the basics. I wonder if we should take maybe a little break before we get into like the tips and tricks of what do you do? What do you do for you? What do you do for others? And you know, I brought a list of what not to do. You know I brought that list.
That's your favorite list to make.
That's my favorite list.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe a little break.
Yeah, let's take a break.
Let's take a break.
We're back.
Welcome back to the Grief Hour.
Yes.
With Kyle.
And Jackie.
Very somber.
As I laugh.
No humor.
As I laugh.
It's okay. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to laugh.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you why. Because I have Kyle's tips and tricks.
Yes.
To grief.
I am here for it.
So these are for like your own grief.
Right.
So like if you are going through grief, here's some things to either do or just to recognize. So the first one, and probably the most simple, is just give yourself space to grieve.
Yes.
Like, have those feelings. It's totally fine. If you're worried about, I think a lot of people worry, oh, if I start grieving, I'm not be able to stop it. One, that's not true, because emotions are states, not traits, right?
Yes.
You've never been happy forever. You've never been sad forever.
Right.
Grief is
I like that.
very much the same. So it's just people fear the intensity.
Yes. Yeah.
So what I have people do for this is schedule a little grief time.
Oh, yes, yes.
Put it on, on your calendar, put it in your phone, from 4 to 5. That's my grief hour.
Yes.
I'm going to do whatever it is I do.
Yes.
And then when my little alarm goes off, boop, 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 I'm done.
I did tell a client of mine in the prison who was very anxious. I know it's not grief, but it's similar. I was like, I said, how about, from
it's
like
the same.
4 to 5, you get to worry in that hour about whatever you want, whatever you
anything.
want. And then the rest of the time, stop worrying because I'm sick of hearing about it.
Right. Because I'm
Literally
tired.
told him that.
Because I'm tired.
I said, I'm tired of listening to you talk about this.
No, that's because it gives your brain that sense of, okay, there's an end.
Right.
Because if you just say like, oh, I'm going to open the floodgates, your brain's like, oh my God. No, nope, we have an end time.
Yes.
But it also allows you to have that space. Like, you plan it at a time that you're free. It's not going to get pushed away.
Yep.
If you need to be by yourself, you're by yourself.
Right.
All of that. There's another phenomenon in grief that I call the first of the firsts.
Okay.
So this is the first birthday, the first anniversary, the first holidays, all of these things where grief tends to feel a lot worse, especially the first go around.
Okay. Yep.
And so what we typically work on with this is creating some sort of ritual or physical representation. Because a lot of the times why grief is so difficult is because we don't have a tangible thing to go with it. So something you might do, like if it's their birthday, maybe you go out to eat to their favorite restaurant, like where you would have gone. Or maybe you make them their favorite meal because you would have made them dinner that night. Or maybe you would have made them like a cherry pie, and so you make them a cherry pie that night, like in their memory. And so that gives you a physical representation, because we're physical creatures and we like to see things.
Yes.
To say, this is my grief, this cherry pie is my grief, which I realize sounds ridiculous, but it really helps you.
No, I think that's a good that's a good thing.
And it helps you feel closer to that person as well, because again, their physical body is gone. And it's like, you have memories and all of that, but again, those are not tangible.
I feel like that helps you live in the moment a little bit more too. Like you eat that cherry pie and you're like, cool.
Like, and it's not that you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like, you still probably will cry and feel really sad, but that's like the point of, like, that is grief. Like, sometimes you have to cry.
Yes.
Like, I know it doesn't feel good, but
no, everybody hates it.
Sometimes it does feel good, like once you get it out. But you can also do something like you go and visit like where they're buried, or if you have like their ashes, like you maybe have some kind of little ritual with that.
Yes.
So creating those physical representations, especially around the first of the firsts.
Yes.
So Christmas, Thanksgiving, all of those things as well. Going back to the making a space for grief, I wanted to say this, in that I usually tell people grief is like the ocean tide. In that when you just make space and you understand that like some days your grief is going to be heavy and some days it's not, that actually helps you deal with it.
Yeah.
Same thing as the ocean tide. Like there are some days where the tide rolls in and you feel some type of way about that, but you know it's not going to be forever. You know it's going to roll back out.
Right.
But even when it's out, you know it's going to roll back in.
Yes.
So having that understanding of grief and that it will change over time, again, helps you to make that space for it.
Yeah.
You can find a grief group.
Yes.
That can be very helpful.
Yes.
And we'll talk about why that can be helpful to be with other people who've experienced grief. You've kind of said, like, some people don't know what to say. But I think especially if you've experienced traumatic grief, this can be
very helpful.
So, like, on oncology where I work, we had grief groups because I think losing someone to cancer can be very different than other ways. Another way that you can feel close to your loved one, if you feel kind of disconnected from this, to write them a letter.
Yeah, I've heard that one too.
Or you can talk to them.
Right.
It's okay. It's okay to talk to them. And kind of ask like their advice, or like if you're having a hard time, and then kind of thinking like, what would they say to me? What would be their advice? Because if there's someone you truly cared about, you know what they're going to say to you.
Yeah.
You know the advice. You can also rely on spirituality or religion if that's your tea. You don't have to. I mean, you definitely need some kind of spirituality, and this is where people like are like, oh, religion sucks. Like, when it's used as a weapon, yes.
Yeah.
However, religion is considered a protective factor in our world.
It is very much so.
And it doesn't have to be an organized religion. It can be like a spirituality, but...
No, you don't have to follow like an organized religion to be spiritual necessarily.
But you do have to have some idea of like the way the world works.
Right.
Know? And so this can be very helpful with grief in that it kind of gives you that sense of peace. So like if it is Christianity, to think like, okay, they're in heaven. Like, I know they're in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're not suffering. Or if it's even like, okay, they've been reincarnated. Like, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Whatever is your tea is your tea.
Yes.
Let's see. Delegate any kind of mundane task that you don't want to do to people who have offered support.
Ooh.
So if you don't want to go grocery shopping, give your list to somebody else. If you don't want to go fill up your car with gas,
be me.
go give it to somebody else.
I'd be like, I'm not grocery shopping today. Bye.
Or like make it like do grocery pickup, or like have it delivered.
Make it easier for yourself.
Because processing your grief takes energy.
Yes.
And you are not going to want to do these things.
Yes.
If you want to clean your house, have someone come clean it for you. Seriously.
Yeah, no.
And people will offer, and I always say if people offered help, take it, because they wouldn't offer if they didn't want to help you.
As a person who like has offered help to people, I mean, I know that's kind of something that is also not the best thing to do. It's like, oh, let me know what you need. Well, then that puts the burden on the other person to say, oh, this is what I need. But I would love if somebody was like, hey, this would be really helpful. Sure. I'm not even going to ask you. I'm not even going to ask any questions.
Or just like, hey, I want a bag of Cheetos.
Like chips. Yeah.
Chips, Cheetos.
Yeah.
Flamin' Hot Cheetos from the gas station. Will you pick me up some?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, I will. And I'll eat them with you too, because I fucking love Flamin' Hot Cheetos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, always feel free to do that. So for traumatic grief, I kind of talked about this, but people can get stuck with the traumatic memories, right? Like if it was cancer, they think about them like in hospice. So what we have to do for that is we have to get away from those as the memories. Yeah. We have to refocus on who were they really? Like them in that hospice bed, not them. Right. That was them with cancer. Like who were they before?
Right.
And my patients really hate this because they'll start to like get in that like traumatic spiral, and I'll go, what's your like favorite memory? Like tell me like something really like funny about them. And so then they'll like tell a story, and then they'll like feel better, and they'll be like, I see what you did. I'll be like,
that's my favorite in therapy. It's like, I know what you're doing.
Right. So and it's really hard, and like I realize it's and not a switch you can just flip, but like in those moments, learning how to be like, no, I cannot think about this. Like I need to think about something else, because that can really stagnate your grieving. And I said this earlier, for complicated grief, right, like it's your abusive father that died, you are probably gonna have to go to therapy for that one. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's
maybe not. Maybe you're like good riddance, sayonara. But I think most people,
I would say the majority of people probably won't be able to get away with saying peace out. I think there's a very small minority of people that would be able to do that without any sort of issue. Right.
And I think it's going to haunt you at some point.
A lot of those people had probably grieved prior to the death, like maybe if they like cut off if it was a parent, like they cut off contact.
Right. Grieved over that already.
That, and grieving over like what could have been if they had, stayed in contact, or if things have been different.
Or that like, perfect parent figure. Right. Like, I'm never going to have that. I have to get over that now. Kind of thing. Absolutely. Keep a routine. We talked about that earlier. Take care of your basic needs. And this doesn't even have to be like, I'm eating a salad every day. Like, just make sure you're trying to sleep. Make sure you're trying to eat. Make sure you're taking showers.
Yep.
Even if you have 2 Big Macs for lunch, that's fine. I'd rather have 2 Big Macs than nothing. Yeah. So, like, do the basics. Like, do the bare minimum. Yeah. Maybe even a little under that. The mediocre minimum. Hashtag mediocre minimum. And then take time off. if you need it.
Yes.
Take time off from work. Don't feel like you have to go back to work.
People are so weird about this part. I'm making a sweeping generalization, but
no, it's fine.
People are very bizarre. They don't want to like, and I think that's maybe I wonder if that's part of like American culture in some ways.
That's the tea.
I don't think other cultures are as bad as we are in terms of like.
I mean, you only get like a week of like bereavement time in most places.
Yeah, it's not that much.
I will say, in my experience in working with people who grieve, I would say the majority of their jobs have been very, very supportive.
Yeah.
And I very much appreciate that to anyone, if that's you listening.
Yeah.
If you've made those decisions, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But people will sometimes they'll feel like, oh, well, I need to get back to a routine. And maybe that's true.
Yeah.
But I think if you try it and it's not working, like recognizing that this isn't for me right now and I really need to take some time off, because that can happen. There are ways to do that for sure. Maybe not for everybody, right? Like maybe some people don't have a job where they can, but I think it doesn't hurt to ask and see like what that can look like. Let's talk about how you help others with grief. So this is what you wanted to know about.
Yes.
So it really is good to offer support. But I think letting people know that you're serious, right? Because like you said, people can just say it and then people feel burdened. Maybe when you just say like, hey, I'm here to help, and then offer some things like, if you want me to go grocery shopping for you, if you want me to clean your house,
right?
If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Like giving some things you may be comfortable with doing. Absolutely. But this may include silence. My favorite too. We don't like silence though. We do not like silence.
People hate silence.
They do. Sometimes this is what people who are grieving need. Like they just need to like be. They just need to like cry. They just need to be hysterical, and you have to be okay with that.
Yep,
that's okay. Like unless they're saying like I'm gonna kill myself. Okay, then no, that's not okay.
That's a little bit different.
That's different. But like if they just like need a moment,
right?
Give them a moment.
Oh,
be that safe space for them to have that moment, and then ground to you when you come back. Like when they come back.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable, but that's sometimes what you have to do.
Yeah.
Even just checking in regularly, you know, and saying like, hey, I'm still here if you need like grocery shopping, or if you need a shoulder to cry on, or if you need some kind of practical errand, just so that they know you're serious. Providing that space to just be in the feels. Do not try to change the feelings. Do not try to cheer them up. Don't help them look on the bright side. Keep it about their feelings. So if they're like, I'm really sad and this is fucked up, be like, this is really sad and fucked up.
Right. Instead of saying like, at least.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah,
at least they're in heaven.
Right.
No.
Get the fuck out of here
Get the fuck out of here with that. Be genuine. So don't offer help if you don't.
Right.
If you're not going to.
Yeah. Don't say, oh, I'll do this for you, and then ghost them like an asshole.
Right. We don't do that. And then be that like support person also that watches like, okay, is this normal, or is this becoming like depression? And again, not that you can do that on like a clinical level, but again, if you're seeing like, okay, it's been 2 weeks, you haven't got out of bed, you've been talking about like not wanting to be here, you haven't ate in 2 weeks, like keep that like 2 week like meter stick, you know, marker in your head. If it seems really bad over a 2 week period, like maybe that's when you start to suggest, you know, things, which you have to be very careful.
Yeah, you have to be.
You have to ask permission.
Yep.
To say, you know, I have an idea. Can I share it with you? And if they say no,
you have to respect.
You have to respect that. Now, again, if they're saying like, "I'm gonna kill myself" and stuff like that,
well, that's different. Yeah, we're not talking about that.
We're not talking about that. So, lastly, what not to do. That kind of brings us into the last thing.
Oh, I can't wait for this.
I know what you're going through.
Nope. Out of here with that shit.
Don't
Bye.
say that. I mean, even people who go to like grief groups for like similar things, so like even on like these oncology grief groups I talked about, they don't say that. It's
so different though, because grief, like if you had a parent pass away and I had a grandparent pass away and I said that to you, that's such a dick move.
Even if it's
because it's so different. I mean, even if you had a sibling and I had a sibling and it's still so different.
Exactly, because you don't know what that relationship was like.
Right.
You don't know what they're going through.
Right.
So absolute, like even when it seems like it's exactly the same, it's not. So don't do that. Don't invalidate their grief, right? Like, so if they're saying, like we said earlier, I'm sad and this is fucked up. Yep, this is.
It's
absolutely.
Totally fucked up, yep.
Do not tell them how to grieve.
People do that.
You know, don't say like, let's pray. Unless they want you to.
Well, yeah, that's different.
Right?
Sorry, I had
no, but like, don't like. That's like you saying, you know, it would really help if we prayed right now. And if they're like, that's not my tea, then you go, okay. But some people don't do that. Some people
And don't say that's my
no.
tea, so I'm going to do it right in front of you. Because people do that too.
Because people do that. Unless they ask. If they come to you and say, like, how would you grieve? Or, I know your mom died. How did you grieve?
Right.
That's very different. But also don't expect them to do that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Don't do the time thing. Don't expect them to be over it in a certain time. And this is something we had to deal with in oncology a lot with, like, spouses, because the person would be like, you know, cancer free. I use quotes with that.
Yeah.
For a year, and the spouse would be like, well, they should be better. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Get out of here. No should or will statements. Don't do that.
Okay.
You should do this or you will do this.
No.
Again, ask permission first if you would like to suggest something like therapy, and then frame it with, like, your own concerns. So if you're like, hey, I'd really like to share some concerns with you,
Right.
and they're like, okay. You say, well, you've been in bed for 2 weeks. I'm just really worried. Do you want me to help you, like, look for a therapist
Right.
or, like, a grief group? And if they say no, then, again, respecting that.
Right.
So, yeah, just don't be a dick.
Yeah. I feel like it's just a good life motto to have anyway.
So, yeah, Jackie, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts or questions, or
No, I mean,
would you say, is that comprehensive?
Yes, I think that's a great place to start for people, especially, you know, if you know somebody who's had a loss or whatever, I mean, in their life, that's helpful, at least, because you just never know what to say.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful, but, you know, even saying something simple is like, I'm here for you if you need it. If you want me to sit in the same room as you while you scream, I will do that. That's why I tell people, I'm like, if you want to, like, talk to me about it, I won't say anything because I don't know what to say, but you can just talk at me. I mean,
but that's the tea, though. And, like, if that's all you take from this is that you don't have to do anything.
No.
You just have to be there and be a supportive force.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yes.
They can have scary feelings.
Yeah, 100%.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So, our famous outros.
Yes.
I have something new for you.
Oh no.
And true tea.
Yeah,
You
I have no idea.
I have
you're
not.
Just
I
telling me
haven't
this
told
now.
you even that I'm doing this. I've told you nothing.
I don't know anything.
And I don't know if this will work. We'll see. We're gonna test it. It's one of our bits.
Yeah.
So
okay.
It's called fetch or flop.
Oh, okay. I'm here for
So basically, when we do this, we'll just kind of come with a couple things. We can have it themed. I have it themed today.
Okay.
And then you just have to tell me, and we'll talk about it too. Is it fetch? Is it cool? Right? Is that fetch?
Fetch, like Mean Girls fetch?
Like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If you don't get these references, please stop listening to our podcast immediately. So yeah, it's fetch. It's good. That's fetch.
Yes.
Or it's a flop.
Gotcha.
We don't like it.
Yes. Flop
Okay.
is bad.
So because it's been educational,
Sure.
I'm keeping it educational.
Oh, that's okay.
And so it's like mental health themed.
Okay.
So the first one is therapy apps.
I'm gonna go with flop.
I have to go with flop as well.
Yeah.
Why would you say flop?
Because I just don't think it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Also, you have to be really careful about what I guess app you're using, or I don't know, research into it. I don't know much. Honestly, I don't really do anything with the apps. Like, I've never looked into them. I just don't think they're good. Like when they say, oh, you could just text your therapist anytime. No, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah. So I actually used to work for one of them. I was on one for a while. Not a great experience.
Okay.
It may have changed now. This was several years ago. They did not you didn't get paid very much.
Oh no.
I think especially now when that most places are offering virtual appointments, because that was where it used to be good, is like people who can't access therapy. It was really great. We're good. I agree. You should not be able to text your therapist 24/7. That's not good.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, the pay was terrible. The one I worked for, they didn't take insurance, and they would say like it's cheaper than therapy. It wasn't.
No,
it was like hundreds of dollars a month.
It usually isn't.
No.
If you actually do the math, when they're like, oh yeah, it's cheaper, but over time,
not.
it's not. It won't be over.
Not at all.
Cheaper.
Not at all. So
Okay.
yeah, flop. Self-help books.
Oh. I'm gonna go with like Fletch. I'm gonna go in the middle because I think it really depends on
need a middle, yeah.
What the content of it is. Overall, I think I would say flop because some of these people who write these books are meh.
Yeah, I think I would say like fetch and kind of thing, right? Like,
yeah.
For the most part, I think you can tell if something is going to be legit or not. Like if they have some kind of letters like PhD or LCSW
You have to,
or LMHC, that's probably, you're going to have some legitimate information.
Hopefully, yes.
But Literally, Jackie one time was like looking for one,
Oh, no.
and one was like, plan your goals, and it was like 1 page of what goals are, and then like 80 pages of blank pages for you to write down your goals. And that was a book for people to write.
Someone got paid a lot of money to do that.
Absolutely. Am I mad I didn't think of it first? Probably.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, in the middle. I don't know. We'll have to think of a middle word. Cussing in therapy.
Fetch.
Fetch. Absolutely.
I have no qualms about doing this.
How do you handle this? Do you go into it and you're just like, whatever, I'm being me?
Well, I'm just going to be honest, and I hate to say this all the time, but when I worked in the prison, it is really hard not to speak. Okay, this is going to sound really wrong.
Circle of safety.
So swearing is that's just ingrained in the that's ingrained in the culture there. I mean, with staff, I shouldn't say it like every single staff swears, but it is really hard. It's really hard to be trying to do therapy with somebody who says they're going to fucking kill you and kill your whole family and screaming at you and saying, so it, and they don't, if you're going to put on this front of like professional, like, this is kind of what we all learn in grad school. It's like, you have to be very professional and you have to use the right language. And what I will just tell you, if you're going to work in with either like mandated clients or clients who are not voluntarily choosing to go to treatment, you're going to get a lot more respect a hell of a lot faster if you're going to use the F word and say fucking sessions, in which I said it all the damn time.
Absolutely.
My favorite thing to ask offenders who are acting up is, what the fuck are you doing?
What the fuck are you doing?
And it was very effective. And it does.
Yeah.
There's been like a study where it's like people who curse more openly are intelligent, are more intelligent, are more trustworthy, and all these things. So it's it's a big fetch for me.
Look at us. We're all those things.
It's very hard. I don't want to say it's like I'm dropping F-bombs every other word in a session, but it's very hard not to, especially when people tell you stuff. I would hear stories from people. Even when I was doing intakes, and I was just like, wow, that's really fucked up. Yeah. And I would say,
yeah. But I think most people respect it.
Yeah.
In general.
I wouldn't curse unless the person cursed to me first. That's usually my gauge.
Yes, that's the gate opens when I hear them. Or I love when they're like, I'm trying not to curse. And I'm like, no,
it's
we
time.
Don't do that. It's time.
It's open. Yep, it's open season up
and
in here.
And then I'm like, yeah, fuck this, fuck that. Yeah. Yeah, yes. Absolutely. And so the last one, calling mental health professionals shrinks.
Flop. What
does
that even mean?
Do you know where that comes from?
No.
I had to Google it. So there's 2 theories. The first one is that...
Because I've always heard that is psychiatrists are shrinks.
Well, so yes, because in the beginning, psychiatrists were the only ones doing therapy back in the right, whatever. But it did in the... I forget. I looked up where at first. It was a Time magazine that called people shrinks. The therapists,
really?
And it really encompassed anyone
Everything.
who would provide any kind of therapy. So there's 2 theories as to where it comes from. So the first one is that there is some sort of Amazon tribe that are headhunters, and they will decapitate and then literally shrink the heads of their enemy tribes, I guess. Okay. So for some reason it was that's a theory saying that's what going to therapy was associated with. It was this very carnal thing. But the other one, who I think this is probably the theory I would go with, is that it was talking about shrinking your ego. Therapists in the day were shrinking your ego because you felt like you needed to go to therapy, and that the ego was all the world was all about you, and that you need to go to therapy to talk about it. God. So they shrunk your ego.
I like the second one more, and I will just tell you, working in a prison, a lot of my sessions with people who had some personality disorders was, why do you think the world revolves around you? Yeah. And I took it as my job to shrink their ego.
Shrink their ego.
With that, actually.
So maybe you are a shrink.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's used very much these days, but still a little bit. Okay. But yeah, I just say flop.
Yeah. Flop.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
No.
So yeah, that's your flop.
I like it.
Yeah.
I did not know that was happening.
I have some others for another time that are not therapy related that I'm very excited to
I can't wait.
Also share in future.
I'm sure the listeners are very excited as well. I'm sure they want to know our thoughts about everything.
I think they do.
Although I do like the random questions, because I feel like everybody gets to know us a little bit. It's like peeling back an onion.
Which is scary. That's scary. I don't know that these people want to peel back this onion. I don't know.
The core is just rotted.
The core, there is no core. It's just like a black hole. What is that, M22 or M82? It's just that's it. So,
Well, everyone. It's time to be done.
It's time to be done.
Our mascot is
our mascot is getting rowdy. Sorry if you hear him in the background.
Yeah, it's okay.
He wants to share what he thinks about grief. He's ready to make out. We haven't made out for a while.
It's been a minute, so
we better sign off.
Yes, so we'll say goodbye for now, and
we'll catch you at the next one.
Yep.
Goodbye.
Bye.